Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TEFAF Afternoons. We've had a lot of lively discussions this program series in the afternoons, and I'm so happy to be able to offer you something completely different from what we've done so far, and this is going to be an extremely exciting conversation about one generation handing off to another, but at a time when the digital has so changed all our lives, as we can see, iPads. My name is Linda Lees. I'm the Director of Cultural Programming for TEFAF New York. I also want to add a little piece of housekeeping that this panel is being live streamed, so people out there can be watching it as it happens. It's also available to you immediately after in case there's some golden nuggets that you miss during this 1 hour and you want to go back and check on them. And also if you want to recommend this panel to friends who weren't able to be here or colleagues, that would be great also. So I'm going to make very short, a short introduction of Tony Freund, editor and director of Fine Art and First Dibs, and he's going to moderate this terrific panel this afternoon.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you all for coming. I am thrilled to be with these people, legends and future legends, and it's Bunny and Jamie are people I'm particularly in awe of, and I'm also so fascinated by this idea of the evolution of a design firm and also an aesthetic and how it gets passed on from decade to decade and generation to generations. I think there's a lot of rich material here. But before we do that, I'm going to do some formal introductions. I'm going to read, so bear with me. You probably don't need to know who these people are, but I'm going to do it nonetheless because they have incredible resumes and you should hear about it. For 3 decades, Bunny Williams Interior Design has built a legacy of superior design that's rooted in long-lasting and valued relationships with clientele. Bunny's ability to mentor yet another generation of talented designers firmly establishes her firm as one of the most important voices in the evolving history of design. Her design accomplishments aside, Bunny is also an accomplished businesswoman, entrepreneur, author, and philanthropist. And I'm going to put an exclamation point on the philanthropist part because I think there's no one in the design world who works as tirelessly for good causes and to support the design industry than Bunny. She's at everything.
Except Jane.
That's true. You stole my punchline. She marshals the troops and raises countless funds for all sorts of good causes. So that's in itself something to admire you for. A lover of dogs, gardens, and china, Bunny's knowledge and expertise is on par with her enjoyment of life. Her eponymous firm, launched in 1988, following a 22-year apprenticeship with the esteemed Parrish Hadley Associates, has wrought its own indelible imprint and legacy in projects across the United States and abroad, in city apartments, country estates, and cottages, in the mountains and by the water. Bunny's own houses and her long career have provided ample material and inspiration for 6 books to date, and she's a sought-after speaker and mentor on design, decoration, gardening, and entertaining. And I have to say, of all of those words that I just read, the thing that struck me is that she, and these were your words, 22-year apprenticeship at Parrish Hadley. So I want to talk about that a bit later. And then to Bunny's left, is Elizabeth Lawrence, née Swartz. She just got married a month ago, so we're all adjusting to the Lawrence. Elizabeth was named partner of Bunny Williams Associates in 2017 after a 14-year tenure at the firm, which began with a coveted internship. Elizabeth has said, quote, "These days it's rare to rise from intern to partner while under one roof. In my case, I found my calling through the apprenticeship tradition, much the way Bunny did at Parrish Hadley." Originally from Wilmington, Delaware, Elizabeth attended the University of Richmond and then the New York School of Interior Design. After graduation, her internship at Bunny Williams led to a job as junior designer, and she rose later to senior designer. According to Elizabeth, quote, "Bunny is an ideal mentor and collaborator, and we take our partnership seriously. She sets the stage with her vast experience, practicality, intelligence, and sense of humor. Generous in spirit, she invests in her staff when they show initiative, drive, and talent. So I worked hard to meet these expectations," end quote. Now, all the way at the end is Jamie Drake. Jamie's the co-founder of the award-winning multidisciplinary interior design firm Drake Anderson. Arguably the foremost colorist of our day, Jamie brings his singular, exuberant design sensibility, which he has developed over 30 years, to every project. Lauded for his ability to distill his vast knowledge of periods and styles with a discriminatingly modern connoisseurship, he creates environments that are both glamorous and eloquent, yet always interpreted through the unique prism of each client, and assembled with a sense of contemporary comfort. Jamie's unmistakable flair is highly sought after by such clients as Madonna, Mayor Michael Bloomberg, and many in the glittering social scene of which he too partakes. I love that. Jamie's work has been featured in virtually every publication of note, and he, like Bunny, gives back to the design community in serious and impactful ways. He currently serves on the boards of the Alpha Workshops, the New York Community Trust, and Parsons School of Design. He's a vice chair of the Kips Bay Decorator Show House, Bunny's longtime charity, which benefits the Kips Bay Boys and Girls Club, and he's a recipient of a Partnership for the Homeless Directors Award. And then finally, Caleb Anderson brings a polished sensibility and unique design vision to Drake Anderson. Known for the seemingly effortless skill with which he pairs custom creations with furnishings of seemingly disparate styles and periods, Caleb's work consistently results in rooms that are witty, elegant, and unexpected. Drake Anderson projects include sophisticated, glamorous interiors and residential towers from New York to Shanghai, as well as sprawling Hamptons estates, cutting-edge medical facilities, and nonprofit foundation headquarters. While still in college in Texas, his home state, Caleb was hired by his aunt to renovate her Georgian-style house outside Dallas. Armed with this real-world experience, he sent his resume on a whim to a handful of firms in New York, landing an internship with Jamie Drake, another intern. The internship turned into a full-time job, and over the next 3 years, he learned from Jamie how to run a business. In his next position with David Mann at MR Architecture and Decor, he honed his management skills on projects ranging from private residence to a boutique winery in China. After a few years on his own, Jamie brought him back to the firm in late 2015 as a partner in the newly formed Drake Anderson. So you had a little bit, Elizabeth, you've only worked with Bunny. You've had 3 years with another firm. But basically, these two interns have stuck with their mentors and made good. So those are the introductions. So I guess, we're going to talk about the digital revolution and how the internet and social media have changed the design business. But before we get there, I do want to touch on this subject of mentorship. Since it's such an important thread that runs through both of these firms. So I want to turn first to Bunny and Jamie and say, who were your first mentors and or role models, and how does what they taught you still kind of affect how you go about your business today?
Well, needless to say, when you get your second job at Parish Hadley, I was 22 years old, and you go to a firm as the secretary. You have to be willing to start at the bottom. So I was Albert Hadley's secretary, which was fun because I didn't know how to type, and the typewriter was in a roll-top desk, so I didn't think that was a total requirement. And you, on the third day of your employment, you're asked to deliver some shopping bags to an apartment on Fifth Avenue. And you ring the bell or you go up, the doorman lets you up, and the butler opens the door. And there behind you is Picasso's White Pony with a boy standing there. And I'm looking, my jaw dropped. I'd had art history, and I thought, that's not the poster version. That must be the real thing. And what you realize I think when you go to work at a firm, and certainly in the beginning, is you see interiors that are just extraordinary. And it's humbling because you think, how could I ever do that? The collection of furniture, the art, the placement, the room arrangement. And starting out, you're just rather overwhelmed. But it's the best place to be because you get to see real rooms, the projects they're working on. And I think working up in the firm, you learn the paperwork first. I mean, you have to do the purchasing. You have to understand estimating. You have to understand the business part of it. You don't just jump into the decorating. And that is, to me, what in the end is going to make you have a successful career or not. And you also, as an apprentice, you see the back end of the job. You see the installation. You see how the truck comes, the trucks come, and everything is put in place in a week. And that's discipline, and it's knowledge, it's planning, and it's so great to be the young person on that project to understand and learn sort of the mechanics of decorating. And the design is obviously, hopefully one has a flair and their own sensibility and how they put things together, but it's really the learning so much, the real practice of interior design, which is, I think, so essential.
And when I was in college at Parsons, I did an internship with Angelo Donghia one summer. And so that clearly influenced me in many ways. It was, like Bunny said, going to a project, seeing a fantastic house, seeing an installation come together, the small bits as well as the large bits. But there were very important lessons I learned about presentation and how polished that office was, and everything about it was so organized and polished and on message. And then to the small details, such as when you went to an installation, they rented a very cheap car because they never wanted to drive up in a fancy car to a client's house. I thought that was a very interesting lesson, which I sadly haven't learned myself.
Well, you both obviously had a lot of talent as young people, but also just to kind of land at the very top firms working at the time is such a gift. And well, maybe I should now turn this to Elizabeth and Caleb, because you both landed as very young designers at the top talent. So that's an opportunity you either take advantage of or you squander it. You clearly both took advantage of it. So tell me, what was it that you first learned, or what was the sort of biggest lesson, and when did you realize you were sort of in the presence of greatness?
Did you scale it in? Have you sat in it? Have you seen it? Have you tasted it? Bunny's very big on that. She's very big on making sure you've seen the piece. And it's so important because nowadays you can see something online and you get the chair and it's way too small. And so that's something she's constantly asking us. And she has such a great sense of scale naturally. And so it's something that you have to train your eye for. And it's invaluable. And it's something she's really instilled in all of us.
I mean, I think, from early on, even as an intern observing Jamie, I was so enamored by the business and him and how, every little detail from how, the publicity, the meetings with clients, installations, it was all very fascinating to me. So, even though I may have had a task or something I was working on at the time, I was always sort of aware of what was going on around me and sort of absorbing what he was doing. So I think I learned a lot from that, just always sort of being aware and paying attention to what's going on, with him and the office. But when I think of lessons he's taught me, of course, there are, the design-related things. But I think one early on was just confidence and decisiveness. As a young designer, a lot of times I think you put things out there and you're nervous or uncomfortable or unsure, but Jamie always encouraged me and encourages people to present things with confidence. You never want to put something out there and be unsure. You want the client to know that, you're confident in your choice. So that was a big thing that I learned from him early on. And also just, I think one of the great things about Jamie is he's so gracious. And in a time of conflict, whether it be with, a client, God forbid, or a contractor or someone in the office, he always handles it so well. And that's not easy, you know, it's a stressful industry. So I think just observing that and hoping to be that way too is a big lesson for me.
So these are great, but I'm so interested. I see a lot of rooms, and there are a lot of good rooms, and then there are very few great rooms. And you both have consistently designed great rooms. So I'm kind of interested in, how do you pass on that DNA? And how is that something you can teach? And did you see in Elizabeth and Caleb that they had the potential to kind of get it?
Oh yeah, I think, you know, anybody that you're going to have come in your life to be your partner, Elizabeth from the very beginning used to put together, and still does, the most extraordinary schemes. I mean, her combinations of colors and fabrics, and she always gets it right. I mean, I saw that in the very beginning. And you always need to, you know, see something in somebody. And if I'm sure Jamie does the same thing. I mean, we are very organized when we have a presentation. So we've done the schemes, we know what we're doing. And I can tell in 2 seconds in my office who's got that eye and who doesn't. I think that the other thing that's so important is Elizabeth's personality. And I think that you want somebody who knows who they are, because, as Jamie said, it's not always easy. I mean, clients can be really difficult, and they're often more difficult. If Elizabeth and I are working on a project, they're more difficult with her than me. I mean, somehow they behave to me. They're calling Elizabeth 20 times a weekend. And we did a huge project, and it was just before the installation, and the client had a complete meltdown. And I looked at Elizabeth and I said, you know, this isn't about you. This is about this person's anxiety of the 3 years it's taken to build the house. Is she gonna like it? You know, when the door opens, is it everything? And Elizabeth said, you're right, it's not about me, even though she had been insulted and insulted.
I felt like it was about me. I mean, Bunny walked in and I was just gotten off the phone and I was in tears. And you know, the kind where you're going, and Bunny gave me a hug and she was like, this is not about you. And she said, let's go get a drink and dinner. And yes. It was the best thing.
The great thing about hearing things like this is always that we go through the same things at times, and you always think you're doing it alone, like you're the only ones experiencing it, so it's always nice to hear that other top firms have the same sort of issues. And of course the client, I'm sure, was thrilled with it.
Totally. She cried at the end, out of happiness.
The house got published.
And then I was crying again.
I mean, it was...
The house got published, and no, but it was, you know, when after the walk through the house, I mean, she was in tears. But, you know, people, they're very trusting, and yes, we'll buy this, but they don't see it like we do. I mean, this is why we do what we do. And then there's this moment of, am I going to really like it all? And usually it's better than what they thought, hopefully. But it's also just knowing that you have somebody who has confidence in themselves, knows how to behave, and knows how to deal with people. I mean, that is whether it's, I mean, I'm very insistent that whoever we work with, whether it's the client or the vendor or whatever, that they're treated well. And we have no right to be arrogant or hard on people. I just won't stand that. And I think there's a little bit too much of that in our industry. And, but I like to have people around who have that same sensibility.
And I have to say that when Caleb was an intern in my office, yes, it was immediately apparent to me that he was extraordinarily talented and a kind person, and a person who was very interested, a sponge for learning about what was going on, very enthusiastic. And then when he came back to work with me, his talents blossomed after graduation, and he had spent some time in Texas. And rather than from in-house, when I decided it was time for me to think about changing the way I work to a certain extent, expanding our capacity at the same time as maybe sharing the joys and the stresses, that I made a short list of people who I might consider doing it, and the only one who really was at the top of my list was Caleb. And he had already left my firm. It was 3 years already, but I was thrilled when he said yes immediately, because I knew that he had the broader gifts, not just wonderful taste and style and an appreciation of fabrications and textures and antiques and contemporary design, but all of the other things of dealing with clients and marketing skills and just a general sense of business, since he had had his own business for a few years as well.
We actually profiled Caleb about a week and a half before you named him your partner, so I always thought we deserved the finder's fee, but clearly you knew about
Tony,
him before.
we did start the conversation a little earlier than you went to print.
So I'm stuck on this subject, so I'm going to bear with me. But Bunny, you worked for Parrish Hadley, arguably the most important interior design firm of the 20th century. It produced countless incredibly talented designers, but Parrish Hadley does not exist anymore. So does that, and Jamie too, were you thinking about sort of this brand that you developed and this culture that you developed, and hoping that it would live on beyond you into generations?
Oh yes, I mean I think you sit at a certain age, of which I am, you do sit and think about that. You also want for the people that have been with you to give them the opportunity to go on and have it expand. I also think that Elizabeth's been such a huge support to me. You know, I have a furniture company, Bunny Williams Home. I have licensings, all the things that we do, and those are really the future in many cases of design, as we're probably going to talk about, of how design has changed. And I think that having her perspective and a younger person's perspective in a lot of things is very beneficial to me. And yes, I'd like to see it go on, whether it's Bunny Williams or Elizabeth Lawrence. It's not that I have such an ego that it has to be my name, but I'd like to give what I know and pass on my knowledge to someone to have their own successful career.
I don't think I was really very legacy-driven as far as the name and the brand, but I think that we do live in a time where we do see different opportunities in a broader sense than maybe people did in the past. And our industry historically isn't really known for continuing on. Yes, there's Macmillan, and there's Dorothy Draper, but that's about it. As Parrish Hadley famously they didn't at the end of the day want it to go on, clearly. It was après moi le déluge. But I think that we're seeing, besides Bunny and Elizabeth and Caleb and I, we see Ellie has done it, David Kleinberg has done it. It's definitely, we're all on trend. And it wasn't that we all talked about it together, but other people have come to me subsequently. A number of people have come to me subsequently and said, you know, what you did was so smart and so intelligent, and how did you do it, and how do you think I should do it, and how did you decide on Caleb? Where did you find him? And it's, so I've been mentoring others with this through this notion and process of continuity, and I think it's a way also of us to ensure our clients have continuity of great service. I mean, not all my clients, luckily, are my age. Yes, we have some that are older, but we have many that are younger, and which I think is so fabulous to have a vivacity and vibrancy of client base.
Great. So the mentors have passed on their knowledge to you and opportunities. So what have you taught Bunny, Elizabeth, and Caleb? What do you think you've taught Jamie?
Yeah, when you sent me that question, I said, I don't know, there's a lot of things she's taught me. But I think, I think she does appreciate, totally, I see that she appreciates my input and she wants it, and she says, come here, I want to talk to you about something. I know there's, something cool that she wants to have my input on, and that really means a lot. I take it very seriously, this company that Bunny has built and where she has come from. I tell our interns all the time, I'm like, read the book on Sister Parish, read these things, know where you came from, know this legacy, because it's really important. And so I think I've maybe helped Bunny with her Instagram a few times, but now she's really just like taken off on Instagram. And if you follow her, there's really great things over the weekend and from the country. And then I'm like, well, I'm not posting, but Bunny's posting, I gotta post. So I think I've helped in things like that, but I think it's just been a nice collaboration.
I struggle with that question too a little bit. But I think, I don't know, one of the things that I don't know if taught you is the right word, but maybe helped you work with millennials that work in our office. But also I think a big one is just maybe a little bit more flexibility in terms of how we do client presentations and our process of reviewing with staff. And in working with those millennials, kind of understanding ways that work, they respond well to, as well as Jamie. So I think just adapting some processes that work for both of us and our office is probably a big one.
Caleb is much more nurturing with our team than I am. I can tend to be a little cranky and worn out and a little tense at times, but he's really the nurturer in the office. And he understands that they want to be heard consistently and want it their way. And he's just better at that than I am.
So Caleb, you can all sign up for millennial counseling after this with Caleb. I can certainly use that.
My favorite interview was when someone came to interview for me for a job, and they came totally unprepared in the first place. I think their father had probably asked if I would see this person. So I give time, and we're talking, and they're totally underprepared. And then this young lady said to me, "Now, if I come to work for you, where do you think I'll be in 5 years?" And I said, "Well, I don't know where you're going to be in 5 minutes, but it's not here. But I would like to give you some pointers for your next interview." I should have sent her father a bill.
Caleb could have done an intervention for you. And so we touched on Instagram a little bit. Tell me how much Instagram, I guess for the younger generation, how much has that influenced your aesthetic, do you think? And
well, I think it's a really great way to see what other people across the world are doing, and it is inspiring. It's something Bunny and I talk a lot about. And, I feel it's an Instagram world we're now living in, and how do we relate to that, and how do we show some of our projects but not too much of our projects because we want to be published. And there's a real balance there, and there's the privacy of our clients, which is a new thing we've had to have meetings about in our office, about what everyone is posting on their individual Instagrams. And so it's a tricky new world. But I do find it inspiring. I love, I will fall down the Instagram hole, and all of a sudden I've found someone new, and I've seen something interesting that someone's doing, in Belgium, and it's just such a great experience to see all of that.
And you're incorporating it into your practice? Are you?
I mean, we will also have clients who come to us and say, "I found this thing on Instagram. I really like this chair." They will use it as reference points, and so then we're looking at it. And I think you have to be out there looking at Instagram. I think if you're not, you're missing a big part of what's happening.
I agree. I mean, it's interesting, the young clients come with a notebook this thick of all their Pinterest pictures of what they like. Well, they like everything from an all-white modernist room to a room full of Chinese wallpaper and chintz. So they can't really decide what they like. I mean, that book doesn't really help us at all. So we usually put it together in categories and say, this is one direction, this is another, it's... but it is a vocabulary. I mean, the thing that's fun about it is that at least you get to see something somebody responded to in a picture. And they love doing it. And, we'll be trying to pick out something, and then they'll send 5 more pictures of chandeliers that are perfectly hideous. But, it's where we are. It's completely, I mean, when I think back of when I first started in the business, and the only thing you saw was something that was published in a magazine, and that was really very small percentage of the work being done. And now, young designers can create a career on their Instagram and web page, and you don't know who they are, where they've been. There was a thing in the Times last week about 4 designers that have many, many more followers than I do, and I've never heard of them. I mean, I looked them up, but you can, this is this digital thing that you can create your career.
Well, there's designers who have big followings and have a real look, except the only thing they're showing are things that are done by other people. I mean, and they don't claim necessarily that it's their work. It's carefully worded, but it's a fascinating phenomenon, and they're building businesses based on that.
And they're building a business based on images of things. If you've been around as long as I have, and I'm sure Jamie, you recognize even if they do a room, I go, oh, well, that was so-and-so, such and such that was in the Vogue, Pauline Rothschild or something, and it's copying things that have been around. It's not new creative material.
Yeah, I would be I think what you were saying is that you see exciting things, pieces, and I see pieces too. I don't think that at the end of the day it's influencing our work to see a completed project at all. But discovering sources or discovering a new piece,
Or seeing
yes.
a room. I mean, I love it because, I write down a house I've never seen in France that was, open, or I follow a lot of gardening things, so I'm always finding a plant I don't own or whatever. But it's not that you do it to copy the room, but it's, you learn about shops or different places that you might want to go. But it's just such an interesting thing how people who do it all the time can create a brand for themselves.
Are these, would question, are these actual rooms that are habitable, or are these, a lot of these images or tableaus done for the sake of that Instagram shot? And I wonder, to a certain degree, traditionally, when you would do a room, would you be thinking about how this would look on the cover of AD, and today, are you thinking how many followers am I going to get if we post this on Instagram?
No, because first of all, as Elizabeth said, we can't post it. I mean, I can't post. We have to respect our clients' privacy. So I can't be. They don't want to see my Instagram with their living room in it without permission. So we tend to post little small things, a chair we've seen, or a color, or a beautiful rug that we may want to use, but not the room.
I mean, we've recently sort of changed our Instagram because, a lot of prospective clients were coming to us through Instagram. I mean, it was essentially becoming a portfolio of sorts. So, rather than going directly to our website or something like that, they were finding us through, the posts that we had on Instagram. So we have tried to post more projects and details of projects that are our projects, to sort of build our Instagram page, because it's acting as a portfolio of sorts for us now.
At Drake__Anderson.
It's interesting, Elizabeth said to me the other day, we were talking about this, and she said, what was the...
So the new research is that the human attention span has gone from 12 seconds to 8, which is less than a goldfish. So you have to put up something really compelling to get someone to stop, look, like, and maybe read your caption. So.
And as you say, I mean, we all invest a great deal in our websites. I mean, our websites is the story of who we are. It runs full projects. It's, anybody who's going to hire you is going to go to your website, but that website might take them 25 minutes to go through, where the Instagram picture brings them in 8 seconds. Oh, I like this picture. Who did it? So that's why you have to do both.
Have you had any clients come to you because that was the first point of finding out about you was Instagram? We have. They saw things on Instagram and they got led to us through a supplier to our page. Yeah.
I think another interesting thing about Instagram is, you have been at an art fair or something like that and posted a painting you liked, and the client will say, "Oh, I want to buy that painting." So it's even become a sales tool of sorts for us.
We've had that happen where we've posted something we've seen we liked, and they say, "Oh, I want that table setting."
It's actually dollars now. It translates to dollars.
So just for equal opportunity, we're all talking about Instagram. Is there any other platform that is powerful for you guys? No.
Facebook is old. Facebook is over. And I never, what's that? Snapchat. I never
did that.
I never got through the Snapchat. Twitter's political. Look, we could go there, but that might be dangerous.
Pinterest. I know when I was renovating my kitchen, I was Pinterest kitchen images. They all seem to lead to Stephen Gambrell, I have to say. But
Yeah.
Pinterest was a good source for me.
I think our clients use Pinterest more than we do. So we'll have to go on and look at their pages they've made and use that as a reference.
I think, a few years ago, people were ripping pages out of magazines. Now they're pinning things on Pinterest. It's sort of
And there
replaced
will
that.
be no magazines, sadly.
Yeah, we do
Yes.
too.
So that's an interesting, I want to ask you about that. How I've heard designers complain about the clients, the internet, First Dibs included, has educated clients, or educated in quotes, as you said, showing you 12 hideous chandeliers. Not that we sell hideous chandeliers on First Dibs, but there are hideous chandeliers out there. In a way, everybody now thinks they're a design expert. So talk about the pros and the cons of that.
Listen, I love First Dibs. We all do. However, even being in this building, I think of how many years have we come to every antique show, looked at things, and as Elizabeth said, you've got to see it. I mean, furniture, art, objects, they have a soul when you can see them. And you walk through a museum and something catches your eye because it's a beautiful form. And you're not really going to learn that unless you're in the moment. People say, oh, mahogany, brown wood furniture is out. I said, when somebody looks at a piece of faded, beautiful, 200-year-old crotch mahogany, it's as beautiful as anything. Why should it be out? I mean, it should be, collected. And I think that all of us who have grown up looking at furniture, looking at art, my heart stops sometimes when I see a really beautiful piece of furniture. And we use First Dibs a lot for where things are, because I'm not in Texas, or I'm not in Atlanta, I'm not in France, so it expands us. But I would never, ever buy anything without having a long conversation with the dealer and millions of pictures, and I say to the dealer, what's wrong with it? Tell me what is really wonderful about this piece of furniture. I haven't seen it, and we have pictures of, we make people sit in chairs.
And that's funny.
It's so funny. I said to the dealer, you go sit in the chair, and there's this big man and his legs hanging out, and you know that, no, but the chair's too small. So you have to know how to do it. You can't just treat First Dibs or anything like buying, pushing a button and buying through a catalog.
Yeah, well, I wasn't really asking for a plug on First Dibs. It was more asking how you handle these clients who now come to you with these, nonsensical, the minimalist white room and the chinoiserie room, and say, do this for me. And how do you educate them?
One of my clients years ago said to me, the cost of all of this, the education was worth it. And really what you want, I think, is...
That's a great client.
You want them to then be able to have the confidence to go out and buy something on their own, to have enjoyed the experience. And I think that we sit down with them and say, now, this room is all white, it's all modern, and this one isn't. What do you really like? So we have to have that.
Yeah, and Bunny's really big on asking a client, how do you live? And, if you have children, maybe an all-white room is not the thing for you, and nowadays our dark jeans that rub off on the all-white furniture, that's an issue for me in my home, my friends who come over. So Bunny's really good about that. How do you live? Where are you living? What rooms do you live in? What do you need? Do you have children? Where are you plugging in your cell phone? And so that's where that comes up.
And during the process, don't you think if you've got all these prints for his pictures, they begin to kind of describe more what they like. I mean, I think that we are educating people, and you bring them to a fair, you take them shopping. I mean, we go to Europe with clients, and it's hysterical. I mean, they're like, how do I make a decision? And I said, well, we're here to help you do that. And
Yeah, I actually think with this age where everybody has access to all these beautiful images and objects, they actually need your expertise more, because it's stultifying, it's mind-numbing, and I think the more options, I need a curator, and I actually think the best interior designers are curators. They know how to take objects from all periods, styles, and make them work together in a room, and I just don't think civilians, or as I like to call them, have that skill. They, despite having access to lots of beautiful images of beautiful objects, they need you more than ever.
well, so I think, I mean, certainly with what Jamie and Caleb do, you're willing to take risks, and you're not, and it gives them confidence to take a risk. I mean, we may do some unusual color scheme, but you help them through that, and then they have something more exciting in the end.
I think we go about it always with presenting something with confidence, but the reality is not every client actually does allow it. And to ask your question of what are the downsides of all the information clients have, is that occasionally we do have a client who you have to say, listen, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back to the point that I break my arm, but I'm in the Interior Design Hall of Fame. I've been doing this for 40 years. I've won awards globally. Why are you the expert? If you were the expert, then why did you hire us? And we do get that every few years, a client who just can't let go and is an instant expert because of whatever they have gleaned wherever they have gotten that information.
That's when you sick Caleb on them, and he makes nice. Getting back, since we are at TEFAF, and you talked about brown furniture, there's an extraordinary, I assume you all know this, there's an extraordinary room full of objects that predate mid-century modern. How do you feel, fairs like TEFAF, or just generally, how do you feel that antiques dealers can communicate the appeal of this wonderful old material and get that across to a new generation of buyers?
I mean, I think for younger people especially, they're intimidated by antiques. I think that there's a certain level of knowledge that is, I'm speaking about young designers, that they feel they don't have, or that they don't know enough about. So, I think dealers could encourage and help just educating young designers, because it is intimidating. There is a lot to know, and it's important that we can communicate the correct information to our clients. So that would be, I think, an important thing if dealers could get more involved in just making young people excited and interested in learning about antiques.
Of course I love them. My very first job, I was 20 years old, was working at Stair & Company, which was the preeminent English antique dealer. I was the receptionist, but I used to get to write down the catalog, all the shipments that came in. So I learned what a Chippendale chair was and Hepplewhite. And I looked at good furniture, and I think that, in the end that designers who have a strong knowledge of the decorative arts are going to do better than somebody who's just putting together, pretty rooms with nothing in it. I mean, our clients, and I know Jamie's do, I mean, they're often serious art collectors, and they want good things, and we have a responsibility to know about those things. And if a designer really wants to have great projects, they've got to go out and do their homework and learn about furniture and art and be able to speak about it. And we've been working on a big project which is all 18th century French furniture, and luckily I know something about it, but and it was fascinating. I mean, it's an interesting thing, but I always think a room, even if you have a very contemporary room, particularly when you come to this fair and you realize how these old things look modern. I mean, they look fresh and new, and they even look better in a simpler room because you can see them. I mean, they don't have to be in a boiserie paneled room with, they stand up on their own. And I think going to fairs is absolutely essential.
Well, certainly the fairs now are the great place to go. And when you come to see TEFAF, which has redefined the fairs in New York, if not in America, the spectacular quality, it's beautifully shown, it's beautifully displayed. And I think that if you have to have a client who you're trying to educate, or just even a friend, about things that they don't really have a passion about anymore, the fairs are essential, because there just aren't any bricks and mortar dealers to speak of left, especially in New York. There's some in Paris, there's a few in London, but very few even in London. Fairs have become the new showroom. And to see them so beautifully displayed, it can become seductive, and then you have to be a seductive storyteller. Just like Bunny made me swoon over the faded 200-year-old crotch mahogany. But did you hear in her voice? I mean, you could hear how much passion you had about it. There was something in your mind's eye that you just saw the other day that you were talking about that you loved, and that's our job, is to convey that, and the dealer's job is then to further tell the story, tell the history, point out the details that can bring it to life for somebody who might not know that much about it.
And going in, I mean, I think over the years, and as Jamie said, there are fewer, but what I learned from dealers, and dealers want to talk about their furniture. I mean, they want to tell you where it came from and why it's good. Also, I will say, the more you look at really good things, the better you can buy in odd places, because your eye is trained to see something wonderful. Elizabeth and I went to Europe to shop with a client, and we went to Paris, and everything was horribly expensive. And I said, well, if you really want to do it, you come on one of our trips with me in a bus, and we're going to drive around to barns in France and Belgium, and we will find wonderful things. And she's like, okay. So we go to the first barn, and these tables are stacked on top of each other. They're not polished, they're not finished. And I'm looking and looking through this stack, and there was this fabulous table. And I said, this is fantastic. And the dealer got it down. I mean, it was pretty beat up. And I said, this is the way the furniture the dealers buy. We're buying where the dealers buy. This table, polished up and restored, back in Paris, will be 10 times the price. And she said, okay. And we bought fantastic furniture for that house. And it all is there, all polished, all restored. And it's a trip that she'll never forget. I mean, it was so much fun. And I still think shopping and finding things is the best thing we do, get to do.
I want to get back to, I'm so intrigued. You said you were doing a room with 18th century French furniture. So how do you do a room that feels not like a museum, a period room? How do you make it modern? And
he doesn't want it to be modern.
So you're not, but is that sort of, how do you convince your more antiques averse clients to go with a 300-year-old piece? Is it pairing it with a photograph? Is it upholstering it in a funky pattern?
Well, the room behind you is a good example of what we did, which is basically reads, I think, as a contemporary room, but it has those...
This was at Kips Bay.
Yes, those fabulous 19th century pair of chairs from Hobbs in a contemporary fabric. It's sort of an Art Deco fabric, practically. And then with those black welts to call out the lines of the upholstery, it takes it to another level, and it makes it more contemporary and more sculptural and understandable.
Right, and it relates to the Atelier van Lieshout, which is no longer there, but the sculpture, the contemporary Dutch piece.
It's the same in this room that Elizabeth and I did, which is a mixture of some very, very good antiques and a contemporary light fixture made by a young girl in Brooklyn. And to me, this is what's exciting about what we do. It's putting all these things together. So you hope in 20 years, if you look at that room, you won't say, when was that done? It's timeless. It could be any time. And I think we have this freedom. Nobody wants a period room, but you want to put beautiful things in a room. And I think that it's our job as educating with clients is to take them to fairs and take them to shops and getting them to see things and hopefully get as excited about the furniture as we are.
Is there a great inspirational Instagram account that you go to that you could give as a tip that shows antiques deployed beautifully? I'm putting you all on the spot. I didn't prepare you for this, but.
You know, you accidentally connect. So a designer who used to be published all the time, who's one of the probably the most successful, busiest working designers in the world, but never gets published because of NDAs and clients don't want to allow, but Juan Pablo Molyneux. And to see all of his work again, which is so detailed, so traditional, there really isn't anything contemporary about it, but to see all that is kind of inspiring.
I think, I'm a little bit like Elizabeth. I tend to look through my Instagram very quickly. And I don't always know who did it. I'm thinking, oh, this is a beautiful room. But I think that you look at people who've put things together in an unusual way that keeps it fresh, because nobody really does want a period room, and they want to live in it.
I kind of like the historical of John Eunice, who does, right, it's actually things from Architectural Digest from the 80s often, but great houses and things, and again, designers who aren't so known anymore, like Caleb Alaton.
And John does an incredible job of history. He knows the apartment building, who the architect was. I mean, it's like he's really worth following.
Right, it's social and design at the same time.
You feel like you've just had a history lesson. And he was always picking great designers and those rooms. It's great.
Did you all get that? John Eunice, UNIS? What? Y-U-N-I-S.
I think Stephen Sills does a beautiful job of mixing. I mean, every time I see a picture of his, I'm like, well, that's a Rothko with a very clean room and a very beautiful piece of, antique furniture. And everything's just so beautiful and wonderful. And I think he does a great job at that. And it's always fun to see.
When I was looking through my Instagram accounts, not necessarily for the rooms that he puts together, which he does do beautiful work, but just the Instagram posts themselves and posting interesting antiques and beautiful paintings. Ashley Hicks, to me, has a really interesting Instagram account. If you go through, he finds really marvelous things and has really insightful little tidbits about them. So I enjoy following him.
And then our friend Brian McCarthy, who we can be voyeurs of his rich Russians in Mezhev and Stad and all over the place.
Now I've lost track of time. I don't have my phone.
I think we're just a couple minutes. I don't think we really have time for a question now.
We don't have time for questions. Okay. So getting back to, again, antiques and educating younger people. Do you and your firm, I know Robert A.M. Stern gives travel grants. He has Wednesday lectures. He's really, he's a historian. How do you teach the young people in your firms about quality antiques?
Bunny, we travel grants. Well, the hell, go to Creole for 2 months.
It was interesting. I introduced Bob Stern at something, and Gary was talking about this. Now, he does have an huge office of 500 people, but I thought, I really should do something like this. I should figure this out because, my team, we all shop and bring back, and we have discussions about it. But as Jamie said, there's there are fewer and fewer antique shops in New York. You can't shop the way you get. So maybe we have to think about that.
But I do think that goes back to technology where we started, which is I'm always saying, please get up, move away from that computer, go. We're 10 blocks from here. We're 10 blocks from there. Go look in person.
Well, TEFAF needs to give complimentary tickets to young, associate designers at every firm in New York City to get them in and
every one of our designers does have them.
Yeah.
Yes. It's very important. And just to go in a shop, I can remember I was 21 and going into Rose Cummings' shop on 57th Street. It was the craziest place. I looked in the window for 5 months. I was too afraid to go in. And then finally I did, and she said, oh, please come in and, unroll the 18th century Chinese wallpaper and talked about this. And I learned so much about being with her for 2 hours.
No, As you say, designers, dealers love to talk. I just think people are very intimidated to actually step through and ask that first question.
Yeah, and Bunny has an amazing library in our office, and it's a really great tool. I think we're always encouraging everyone in the office, you know, you're looking for something, go, you know, look at these books, look at what people in the past have done. And I think that's been a great tool. It's an amazing library.
Well, I think we are done with time, but I'm sorry you didn't get to ask all those myriad questions you have. I have about 40 follow-ups that I'm going to be asking after this, so come on up and try to get them in too. But I want to thank you all. This was wonderful. I wish we could continue talking all afternoon, and I want to thank you all for going beyond the, 8-second attention span and sticking with us for a full hour to hear this incredible wealth of knowledge from these panelists. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us for this fantastic conversation. I think we all learned a lot. I did. Of course, I know very little, but on the other hand, even we like to think that whether you know a lot or a little about a topic, that these panels are going to help the person who knows very little, and also educate the person who thinks they know everything, but doesn't. So I have to put in a plug for the last coffee talk tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock on public monuments and memory. It's going to be, I think, very provocative conversation for New Yorkers and others who care about that topic. Please join us. And another round of huge applause for this terrific panel. Thank you.